millennia, every civilization has sat under the stars, observing them and naming the constellations for themselves. Some have named the constellations after characters from their mythologies, while some have named them after the animals that they recognized from their surroundings. It was the same chain of events for our early Mizo ancestors. Although some of them moved from place to place before many of them eventually settled down in what we now know as modern-day Mizoram, they showed immense skill and tremendous sense of observation because they gave names for over 35 of these constellations and celestial beings. There have been Mizo academics and writers who, in the last few decades, have documented those myths and stories behind our Mizo astronomy, and for this particular video, we lean in heavily on the works of some of those writers. For example, Professor J.V. Luna from Mizoram University wrote in 2023 an incredible paper called Astronomy of the Mizo People. I'm going to read out a short excerpt from the introduction. Most of the ancient Mizo chiefs possessed an extraordinary ability to predict the weather by observing the stars. This knowledge enabled them to plan their agricultural pursuits with remarkable precision, determining the opportune time for clearing land and planting crops. As night fell, the Mizo elders would gather outside, assembling around a bonfire. It was there that they would observe the stars with utmost focus and attention, gaining knowledge and insight that would be passed down to the younger generations. Husband-wife academic duo Malsomdong Liana and R. Lalsangpui also wrote about just how much being able to track these constellations meant to the Mizo people, a people who were otherwise prone to intertribal warfare and hunting expeditions. When men set out for raids, they would exercise caution and exhibit a sense of superstition. They would meticulously choose the most auspicious day and time for their expedition. For this, the alignment of celestial bodies was essential for them. For instance, a crescent moon with a star on the right side was called Tim Atoy, meaning it carries a Tao. If the star was on the left side, it was called Mi Lu Atoy, meaning it carries the enemy's head, and was considered a good omen. Here are some of those famous stories within the exciting realm of Mizo astronomy that existed hundreds of years ago. Mar Arsi, or Sisil. For the Mizo people, the North Star actually has two names, the first one being Mar Arsi, Mar meaning north and Arsi meaning star. That's straightforward enough, but the second name and story behind it is actually what's really interesting. Mizo historian Liang Kaya writes that our Mizo elders would often sit outside in the evenings over an open fire, observing the stars above them. They found that while all the other stars moved gradually across the night sky, there was always this one star that seemed fixed in its place. For this reason, the name Sisil came to be, a portmanteau because Si is short for Arsi, which means star, and Sil, which means stiff or soar, because they believed that this star was to soar, to move like the other stars. According to their beliefs, the position of this star served as a guiding light for lost individuals, helping them to find their path. And additionally, it was used to determine the direction of east and west. As a tribe of stealthy warriors and ambush hunters, they needed to navigate their way through the compass points, and Sisil provided them with the guidance that they needed. Siruk. Interestingly, the Pleiades star cluster are known across many different cultures as the Seven Sisters, even though oftentimes only 6 of them are visible to the naked eye. This has been the reason why there are so many stories trying to explain the reason for the missing 7th star. In ancient Greece, the Pleiades are the 7 daughters of Atlas and Pleione, fleeing from the hunter Orion. Their rising at dawn would signal the start of the navigation season. In Japan, the Pleiades are known as Subaru, which also means unity. They are seen as divine visitors. In Australian Aboriginal culture, the Pleiades are a group of young girls often linked to chasing a man or boy in the Orion constellation. This is the story of how the Pleiades came to be according to our Mizo ancestors. A group of 6 men were tasked with extracting an excellent quality of clay from a particular spot away from their village. While they were all cheerfully digging away, the walls of the cave suddenly gave way, trapping and ultimately killing all 6 men inside. The legend goes that those 6 spirits ascended to the heavens and became what we now called Siruk, the 6 stars of the Pleiades constellation. For the Mizo, the arrival of the Pleiades in the horizon during winter would often signal for their get-togethers to come to an end, and each would return to their homes. Their understanding of the timing of the Pleiades and its annual schedule was quite deep as well, because by mid-May, they understood that it would no longer be possible to spot the Pleiades in the clear nighttime sky. Professor J.V. Luna writes that this would signal to them that it was now time to plant rice in the fields. Later on, the heavy winds would roll into the season and with it displace the Pleiades entirely for a time. They called these winds Sirukla, or the Pleiades displacer. Zongmoyi and Shangchuana. This is how our early Mizo ancestors explained this astronomical event. A long time ago, there was a beautiful woman called Zongmoyi who was from a certain village, and she fell in love with a handsome man from another village called Shangchuana. Because their 2 villages were engulfed in a bitter conflict, Shangchuana would sneak into Zongmoyi's village so that they could be together. Unfortunately, every time he set out to return back to his own village at the break of dawn, he would kill anyone who was in his way, women and children included. The elders of Zongmoyi's village, in the hopes of capturing the culprit, laid an elaborate trap. They would sprinkle ash at the village gate, intending to catch his footprints, but Shangchuana outwitted them all by walking into the village backwards and leaving the same way, concealing the true directions in which he would move. Unfortunately, there came the day when Shangchuana was finally captured and ultimately killed for murdering so many of their people. Realizing that he had had to have an accomplice from their own village, the village forced over 30 women to traipse all over Shangchuana's lifeless body. But when it was her turn, Zongmoyi was unable to follow their orders. Instead, she threw herself over her lover's body, mourning and wailing loudly. Zongmoyi was slain for betraying her village, and the legend goes that the souls of Zongmoyi and Shangchuana ascended to the heavens, forever immortalized as 2 celestial beings that seemed to always stay close to each other in the night sky. According to writer V.L. Ruala, generations of Mizo people would come to believe that when these 2 stars did seem to converge together, it would be accepted as a year of prosperity, and it would be a particularly good year for weddings. Many cultures have mythologies pertaining to the belief that the appearance of a comet signaled a bad omen, whether it be war, famine, or something else of disastrous consequence. The ancient Greeks and Romans saw comets as portents of good or bad fortune. For example, a comet that appeared after Julius Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE was interpreted by his adopted son Octavian as a sign of his deification. For ancient Vedic civilization, however, the appearance of a comet consistently meant it was a bad omen, and it was the same for our early Mizo ancestors. For them, comets were called Simeku, which translates to star with a smoky tail or star with a tail on fire. They believed that the appearance of a comet meant that the chief would pass away very soon. Interestingly enough, according to J.V. Luna, within traditional Mizo society at that time, there would usually be a group of highly skilled priests who were expert astronomers. They would hold advisory roles to the village chief and were widely known for their remarkable ability to accurately predict events such as storms and years of abundance. Zangkwa. The ancient Greeks and some North American peoples referred to Ursa Major as a great bear, while the ancient Egyptians saw a wagon. The ancient Chinese referred to it as an emperor on his chariot from where he controlled the heavens. For the early Mizo people, the Ursa Major constellation really was the story of a man called Koloya, who lived in an area called Sipir. And one day, he began to have dreams of death and dark omens. Koloya set out to visit his grandfather, who lived in a village called Sairum, wanting to employ his skills as a ritualistic priest to get rid of the dreams. His grandfather did exactly that, performing a ritual with a wild chicken in hopes of alleviating any imminent danger to his grandson, after which he sent Koloya on his way. Unfortunately, Koloya could not outrun the prophecy of his dream, and he ended up being attacked and killed by a group of assailants at a pass called Bervakon. That left both Koloya's home village and his grandfather's village wondering what was taking him so long to get home. Finally, a songbird perched outside Koloya's grandfather's house solved the mystery for all of them. It let out a sing-song chirp before delivering an ominous message. Koloya's body lies at Bervakon, it sang, over and over again. What they saw at Bervakon was indeed chilling. What was left of Koloya's lifeless body was discovered, abandoned and alone at Bervakon Pass. Legend goes that Koloya's spirit was lifted up into the heavens and transformed into Ursa Major, or as the early Mizo called it, Zangkwa, with many believing they can even see the small twinkling stars believed to be the bees that once swarmed around where Koloya's leg should be, cut off at the knee. Now, because Ursa Major moves across the night sky nightly and seasonally, our Mizo ancestors actually came up with a phrase based off of this movement, Zangkwa Abungbuang, which roughly translates to, "The tables will turn in our favor one day." To this day, this phrase reminds the Mizo that no matter what circumstances we find ourselves in, the night will soon turn into morning and our hardships will indeed come to an end very soon. You may be familiar with one of the most prominent constellations in our sky, Orion, and how it's named after the mythical hunter from Greek mythology, and that it features in particular two bright stars, the red-hued Betelgeuse and the blue-white Rigel. The ancient Egyptians linked it to the god Osiris, ruler of the underworld, while the Mesopotamians called it the heavenly shepherd, linking it to their god Marduk. But for early Mizos, the Orion constellation has a very different, much simpler, almost humorous origin story. A long time ago, a man was charged with the task of digging holes in the earth to try and capture a jungle rat called the Zurei. At some point, however, he realized he had forgotten his pipe and turned back home to retrieve it. Unfortunately, on his return, he ran into a fierce tiger who promptly overpowered and devoured the man. Now, the villagers heard about this tragedy, and so a group of hunters immediately set out to try and find and kill the tiger. But as the hunters attempted to capture the animal, cornering it while positioned in an arc formation, a sudden darkness descended upon the land, and legend has it that the tiger and hunters all were transformed into stars in the night sky. It is said that the stars in the arc formation are the hunters in mid-attack. Some writers also note that the group of stars seen to the south of the arc formation is the mouse hole that was set out to capture the Zurei, the jungle rat, and that's why this constellation is known to the Mizos as The Betelgeuse, the red bright star, is known as Sikeisen in Mizo astronomy and was believed to be the man who set out to capture the rat. The constellation Taurus has been associated with the great and fearsome bull in many different cultures, from ancient Mesopotamia to ancient Greece. For the early Mizo clans, even though they were very familiar with this animal, the Taurus constellation for them actually is related to an entirely different animal. The legend starts with the Kyangtae clan, one of the many tribes under the Zo Kuki Chin ethnic umbrella. The story goes that one day they set out trying to catch some monkeys by trapping them with a very intelligent, trained dog. However, a brawl erupted between the dog and the monkey, while everyone, including the Kyangtae chief, encircled the two animals, waiting to take action. Suddenly, a great and terrible darkness descended upon the land, and everyone in this party were believed to have ascended into the heavens, forever fixed as stars in the sky. That's why the Mizo people call this constellation Kyangtae, which refers to the Kyangtae encircling the monkey. The dog and monkey are seen in the midst of the battle, appearing as bright stars, while the Kyangtae chief shines even brighter below them. Other cultures associate the star Vega with different myths, such as the Babylonian messenger of light or the Hindu victorious one. The Mizo legend of Shangkupa-Selu, or the Vega star, starts with the story of a brave and great chief called Shangkupa who lived in Xialung, which is believed to be in modern-day Biate. He owned a fearless Mithun ox, which was so large and fearsome that it would often explore the forests alone, returning safely every time. But one day it came upon the appearance of a fearsome tiger. The tiger came head-to-head with the horns of the ox, who proceeded to slowly but surely bring the tiger to its knees as it pushed the tiger, never relenting. The tiger eventually succumbed to its injuries and position, but the bull, still believing that the tiger was alive, refused to relinquish its grip on the smaller animal until it, too, eventually passed away. The legend says that the bull's head, or the spirit of it, rose to the heavens, transforming into its own star, the Vega, or as the Mizos call it, Shangkupa-Selu. These are just a few of the over 30 constellations and celestial bodies that our early Mizo ancestors were familiar with and wove stories for. While they appear to be very different from Western or even ancient Eastern interpretations of those constellations, we can see how equally creative and insightful our Mizo ancestors were in trying to explain these celestial beings, which riveted and entertained them every single night. It reveals even more just how much our Mizo ancestors were storytellers at heart. Storytelling was a great way of helping them remember and study and pass down their understanding of these patterns in the sky. It helped them plan their hunting expeditions, advised them when to plant their crops, and guided them as they navigated new terrain when they moved entire villages. We hope you've enjoyed this brief look at Mizo astronomy, and for Mizo speakers, I highly recommend these Mizo authors who have written a lot more in detail about Mizo astronomy and many more constellations that we've covered in this video. See you next time on Hello Mizoram.